Haleh Esfandiari program at the center. Thank you for coming. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Mohammed Al-Shami. He is a youth activist and advocate trainer, guess where? In Yemen, and Leaders for Democracy Fellow at the Maxwell School of Syracuse University. He will speak for 25 minutes,
so.
and then we will, or even less, and then we will open the floor to your questions. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, and I would like to urge you to pose brief questions and preferably not comments. Ahmed?
So first of all, thank you all for coming, and I really like to thank Wilson Center giving me this chance talking about the civil society as one of the missing powers in Yemen. I'll try my best to squeeze all the points that I have in Yemen in 25 minutes, but then also you will have the floor to give your comments and questions. So generally speaking, start getting an overview about Yemen. I believe what's happening in Yemen is a long series of misdoing, of wrong actions, of unfinished projects happening. It's a way beyond 2015. It is lots of actions happened, started, I would say, maybe if we come to the recent history, starting from 1968, the war in South-South, and then 94, South-North, going to 2007 and the 6 wars in Sada. All these actions, as you all know, start identifying different stakeholders, changing the dynamics, and most complicated, it keeps transformation, the conflict between the different parties in Yemen. The problem is even beyond that, because as you all know, Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the region, which means that one of our main sources of fund is external support, and usually with external supports, it comes the external influence. So also it's surprising to see people who's claiming why this country is influencing over the other, what we know, while we know that most of the poor country usually come dependent on economy, they being influenced in decision-making or making their decisions directly or indirectly. Other thing is the rigid centralization, which also come along with a very weak government. So, I mean, you can imagine it comes to the limit, like even if you want to verify your certificate, you have to go to the capital. And even when you go to the capital, you would find a very weak government that they know no procedure but the bribe, or who should you pay, or how should you get the money. These actions create a mistrust between the community and the people themselves. One of the simplest things that you can find, like if any Yemeni having trouble, you ask him who you would call first, and none of them would tell you 199, which is our Yemeni version of 911, because they always would go to their family, to their tribe, or whoever will support them, and then the last resort will be the government. And as you all know, Yemen have been living in a crisis even before this issue. We used to have a water crisis, a really weak education, health problems. There was no rule of law. You can name all the crises been happening, and also all the international organization used to say that the fund wasn't covering the humanitarian aid Yemen needed during their stability, I would say, to a point. And the last thing, which is the inequality. And inequality in Yemen, it goes beyond Shia, Sunnah, or Hashimist, non-Hashimist. Inequality in Yemen goes to the level of labeling people according to their country, to their state, to their family. So you can see even people living in urban cities or rural cities, and this is what kind of conflicts that we are facing right now. So in my perspective, I don't really believe that we can simply say this war is happening between government or whoever support and against Houthi Saleh or government Islah. We need to identify the other major stakeholders that play a role in this fight. One of them is the military. And as if you know that our military was, especially after 1994, was identified from, I wouldn't even say from the north, but from a specific areas in the north, with just covering up with the other areas. It was controlled by the military leaders, and also there was a huge corruption within the military. Another aspect also which really affect the military was the long process, very complicated process of military restriction that happened during the national dialogue and even after. Uh, for both levels, the military leaders who've been getting lots of benefits from being as the military leaders, all the fund used to go to them, and they are the one distributed to the soldiers. Out of sudden, they start hearing about a new system that will give a payroll or make soldiers depend more on the government, the nation, rather than the leaders. From the other side, the soldiers, all the things that they've been getting is, this is a new Iraq, a new rehabilitation of Iraq, where you're gonna be all dissolved, a new military come from the south, you're gonna lose your job, and you can imagine someone who's getting paid 150 or less, out of sudden you just tell him, even this 150, you're gonna lose it at a certain point. So which one side he will stand? The other side is the resistance, which from the other side, which even, as you know, is still also more complicated, because it is a combination of lots of different groups, that even these groups inside are not really along with each other. And even with some parts of these groups, they are not aligned with both the government and the Houthis. They've been suffering from them both. And of course, we can't ignore Al-Qaeda, which now they have a resort, actually. They have more political vacuum to fill in. They started controlling Al-Mukalla, which is a huge city. And actually, we start hearing about rule and order. So they start working among the people. They start having a good face of they are kind of moderated. They want to fix things around. And we can hear about the community start accepting the idea, not just of the idea of the Al-Qaeda ruling, but because they are looking at what's happening in Taiz, in Aden, and other places. So for me, is either living under a regime, whatever it is, or I would say like the other side is living a crisis or more crisis. So I would go with the other side. Also one of the major issues I would like to identify, as you know, unfortunately, there is no absolute winning from both sides. No one can have an absolute winning, and both sides know that. So they are just keep trying to claim a partial victories from here and there. And this is coming from a community mobilizing, and worse of that, now they are just keep recruiting more and more youth into fight in all areas. What is the consequences of all that? In my opinion, one of the major consequences is the distractions that we have right now. We are not talking about a very well-governed country that it can go beyond crisis, or it can't help when the situation is getting better. We're talking about country who cannot even rule during the days that it was stable. So you can imagine now, even if we cease the fire right now, they still cannot have any clue what to do next. And each day is going is more like a month of restrictions or I would say distractions, where they can't reach a clue of how they will survive it. Yemen have suffered a long problem or a major issue of even absorbing the fund. If you heard about the Friends of Yemen, they've been pledging lots of money that even the government, they cannot know how to absorb this money and spend it among the people. Now the crisis is getting worse, but they still have the same capacity, which they cannot actually run or operate. And again, I would say also the problem is there is no other options start coming over and over, especially for youth. It's either you join one of the groups where you can get at least a fund, you can get support, you can have a backbone, or then have no option, which is the other option that we want to talk about today, which is the civil society that's been absent, or people try to neglect them during the conflict. So what's the civil society are doing right now? Actually, I believe civil society now are doing all the real work that need to be done in the ground. They are the only one who could distribute the water because they are the only channels that can get in the two sites. They distributed the food, they find shelters for IDBs, they start sitting in these remote clinics at least to survive. And also we need to pay attention, this is all happening with no supplies they get, with the siege, just because of the ground fight, and also the siege from outside. And also all the fund they can get right now is from the small private sector that they are still in the ground. Also, so I mean, generally I would say like they are the only power now, say like really saving life in the ground, but also they have lots of problems communicating with the outside, especially because the message they are getting from outside wasn't the right message. Is like, we're cutting fund, we can't work, we don't have a monitoring evaluation plan, and that's why we can't send more fund to Yemen. What is the power that the civil society have right now? You know, the most essential element is they have acceptance. They used to have acceptance before and after from all different sides. They always have a strong reaction, and they react well within each crisis and the specific needs. They have the power, again, as I just say, to access to each village in the country. And also one of the things that's missing, they are the strongest source of information right now. They are the real one who know what's happening in the ground, especially because people keep complaining about biasing of some private media and how they are keep liberalizing stuff, but they never depend on the people who still live in and work in the ground. And generally speaking, they are the only power who create different dynamics of education. They are the one who start creating the idea of debating, the workshops, work in the field, the campaigns, the small campaigns, bringing art, empowering women and youth. And I'll just keep emphasizing in the idea of empowering youth and women, because anyone know our government will know there was no empowerment for both women and youth. Unfortunately, even from the women and youth in this government, because then the competition starts and everyone wants to have his own share. The only environment that women and youth used to have a basic or a base to grow, or at least to have a small backbone, was through the civil society. And also, I would say, like they adapt all the social change that's happening in the ground. As the challenges, what's the challenges?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's don't
Yeah, it's
watch.
like lots of
You
information.
can go over time, no problem.
Okay. What are the challenges they faced? I mean, I would identify it into 3 levels, which is the local level. I would say one of the major elements is the lack of expertise. Youth being deprived from our education system, but also from the trainings that used to be given from the organizations and international organizations in the ground. You can imagine an organization came giving us a training for 3 days in public policy, and then in their report, like, oh, we are graduating a young politician. I don't know how that would be happening, but this is actually what's happening in the ground. They just give them a training for 3 to 5 days and then just send them back to your villages. So now start growing more and more politicians. So it's either they're not giving them the space, or just squeeze them in the corner where they have to act without any kind of expertise. And also the lack of fund. Especially when we're talking about the fund happening in the local ground, we're talking about the very simple fund. $100, 200 can make a difference, can make a huge campaign when it comes to the zone, to the area, to the local ground they've been doing. And that was so obvious, especially after the 2011, and after the youth start making their own initiatives to do their own activities, and the budget they used to consume. But still also with the restrictions of the monitoring evaluation, with the restrictions of unregistering organizations, they always keep held behind. At the national level, I would say there was no harmony between the organizations. I mean, you would find especially during the national dialogue, different organizations doing the same workshop at the same hotel, and sometimes even with the same participant. They just jumping from this room to the other room, talking about the same perspective. Both organizations realized that, but the major issues at that moment was absorbing the fund rather than real implementing in the ground. So also the international organizations used to play a role because we have fund, we need to spend it. It's not like what kind of activities and outcomes that can ensure sustainability. Also, I would say, like, unfortunately, most of the programs never came as a feedback from the youth in the ground. It's usually preceded by an expert who never know or realize what is the real nature or what's the activities that's happening at that time in the ground. So sometimes we've been shifting youth from doing what they really like to do to something else they don't. Also, again, I would say the idea of training. There was like lots of training after another, but there was no capacity building. So we just give them courses to realize, but as an institution, as an organization, there was no element of build this capacity to ensure their sustainability. And of course, as I just mentioned, in the international level, as you just noticed, the continuous neglection. It is so, I would say, so sad to say, like, the civil society never been even mentioned during the conflict happening. None has even held a meeting with the civil society, at least to just see their perspective. And of course, what's happening now in Geneva, I would be sure that the civil society wouldn't be really represented. The other thing is seizing fund. Whenever there is a conflict, we just keep seizing fund instead of looking at what are the alternatives, what are the other activities happening in the ground, and also what are the other options that we still can keep working toward helping the civil society. At least, as I just mentioned, to give the youth other option. I mean, we just need to understand or realize the only option now youth have is either to stay home or to fight. There is no other options that they can have at the time we speak. So we need to keep like advocating, especially from the civil society perspective. They need to keep advocating governments and other civil society to keep the work, to keep the activity in the ground, focusing on the communities or on the local communities and the campaigns that happening at the local level at the time we speak, and then maybe evolve it later to the national and the international level. Because this is the essential element that really can change behavior within the community. Enhance the education also, and start working on completing, again, I would say completing programs. Organizations need to start having harmony to complete each other, or at least to have a long programs, 3 to 5 years, where youth can have a time to build their capacity at the beginning, and then work with them in the field to ensure that we are really graduating a strong civil society, a strong agents that they can help changing the society. I would end by saying, unfortunately, we've been through many different political powers in Yemen that we just realized that all these political powers are more comfortable in conflict rather than in peace, simply because they have no visions, they have no strategies, and whenever there is any kind of stability, the civil society will come to start advocate for what is coming. But when there is conflict, then they can have their tools of oppression and all this kind of stuff. Civil society is the only long-lasting peace because they are the only element that can change the behaviors of the people in the ground. And of course, as you know, even in the advanced countries, the civil society are the one also still responsible to keeping the governments in the track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mohammed, talk a little bit about the situation on the ground. I mean, described what civil society does, what is the situation? Give us an example. So, small towns or villages where you think civil society is active, is making a difference.
So the situation in the ground is very, it's vary from a place to another. Like the capital and some other cities only been suffered by the airstrike. Taiz, Aden, Bala, many other cities are even more worse because they have both airstrikes and the ground conflict. Also, if we go beyond, and this is also one of the major issues that also we need to to speak about when we're talking about villages. If people know Yemen, we know that it's very difficult to access to many villages, and Yemen contains of lots of villages very far away. Now we have a siege. There is no food, there is no water going in and out. So there are many villages that they've been deprived from the lack of water and food. And also, as I said, like because it's distance, nobody is looking at them. So there are so many villages are starving at the time we speak. The civil society are really trying their best to work, toward helping solving this temporary situation. The danger fever starts spreading, especially in Taiz and Hodeidah. So they're trying to send food, to send water, but also we're talking about a local capacity. We're talking about youth that they don't have the ability to move. So it is really a bad situation coming from the conflict, but also from the lack of resources.
Questions? Yes, please. Just wait for the mic and identify you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Dr. Valerie Begley with the International Civil Society Action Network. So I'd like to hear a little bit about the efforts among civil society groups to collaborate, to try to work together. I think there are some new dynamics taking place in these last few months, if you could elaborate. Thank
you. Okay. So if we're talking about the collaboration, again, I would say like all the things that I've been heard from the civil society is urging the international community to start responding to their needs. So they really wanted to work toward both humanitarian and developing programs. So now they're stuck in the humanitarian problems simply because they don't have the capacity because of what's happening in the ground, but also because they don't have a backbone for the people who show them what should they do during the conflict as a part of the development project. But though they come with a really good ideas, they wanted to do town halls, they wanted to do workshops, they wanted to do many innovative campaigns, they wanted to start doing an art campaign, start showing people what's the suffering that they are facing, start having more discussions, focus group discussions among the youth to identify their need. Sometimes even when I have the chance to go to a place to talk about my grievances, this is really helping me, not just looking at what is happening in the ground and realizing that, oh, this is the only fight happening. We need to, like the civil society, the youth themselves need to see another fight going on, which is the civil society, I would say the civil society actions in the ground. There is lots of things that we keep doing till the time being. One of the major elements is the internet. Although we've been suffering from blockade from electricity and all these kind of powers, but also we still can have Google Hangouts, making workshops actually online, talking with the youth from different areas, bring them together to start sharing what they can do in the ground, and then show it as the youth are against, from both sides, against the actions or the conflict.
Back.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the event. My name is Mohammed Al-Shwaiter. I'm from Yemen, Humphrey Fellow at American University. I totally agree with the points, the notes from Mohammed. I might add, one obstacles about facing the youth and civil society in Yemen. It might be raised especially during the revolution or crisis 2011, that the youth, even when they try to raise their voice, it's been stolen by other parties. So what youth we are talking about, dependent or independent, because even the independent, we find that during the crisis, whenever this independent youth try to raise their voice through organizations or new parties, the major players in Yemen, they try to send their affiliates to measure this new organization or any other growing party. So how can the youth or the civil society in Yemen be independent from these big players in Yemen? Thank you.
I totally agree with you, and this is one of the major issues. Like in 2011, the youth come with a plan of the strategic plan of the transition power, which lots of international organizations used to work with them to help them, and out of sudden, like the GCC come and like, okay, now hold this back and just work with the GCC. The International Youth Conference, the idea came from the youth themselves, but then it was taken from the government to be implemented in a very wrong direction rather than what the really youth wanted or the outcomes of this program. For independent, unfortunately, again, I would come to the idea of fund. Most of the youth become dependent. It's the same as our country. It's because they don't have the resource to survive. They don't have the resource to work on whatever they wanted to do. But also one of the important elements, even within the dependent youth, I mean, if we're talking, for example, about the National Dialogue Conference, we would know like even most of the youth who participated was dependent, wasn't independent, but also they were a channel for the other independent youth to grow and prosper. I would say it is a different stages. If we want to go in a very long-lasting, sustainable development, we need to realize that we need to shift powers from dependent to independent only when we can find the resources or they can utilize, but also taking advantage of the dependent youth because they still a voice somehow looking at the future and not holding the grudge of the past.
Please, just wait for the mic, please. Go around the table.
Ahlan Mohammed, shukran jazilan bihara. My name is Joshua Young, and I'm from the University of Richmond doing undergrad research. And I guess my question is, the IMF they're doing this pilot program in Afghanistan, and they've done it in other places where they're helping the country achieve economic dependence and prosperity. So I guess my question would be, could a program such as that, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but do you think a program with such far-reaching implications help Yemen achieve their own prosperity?
Just to clarify, is the education, which project?
Yes. So they have this thing called the, I don't really have it in front of me, but they're essentially just doing this program over 9 months to see how they can improve the condition there and help them achieve prosperity, especially in the wake of the military leaving and a lot of other things where there's pretty much a period of instability. And so I know it's one of the things you spoke about, and the lack of resources. So I just wonder, could sort of a liberal type of institution help?
Yeah.
So, maybe programs are sometimes non-conflict areas. So whether you can apply them to conflict areas, like what goes on in Yemen, and how do you separate this?
Yeah, so I would totally agree with that, and we've seen it, especially in Yemen, because there was different situation. Like there was cities that been in conflict while their neighbors wasn't being in conflict. So one of the real good projects that used to work in the ground is to work with these areas which not been in a conflict yet, to try to help them in a conflict prevention, but then setting them as an example so they can work with their neighbor as I would say not like an expertise, but also as a success stories happening in the ground. I think what really Yemen need now from the civil society, especially because civil society now is somehow the most transparent and accountable when we're talking about the NGOs, because I mean this is one of the goods also when it comes with the fund, is they've been through the process that they can ensure their transparency. So one of the things that we were advocating against is to start creating more like a watchdogs, more like entities from the civil society that can support and build the capacity of both the government and the military. It's really good that to mention also the sector of the military, because also this is one of the things that it is one of the challenges that the civil society need to or keep advocating against or for, is civil society need to work in the military restriction plan. Civil society need to ensure that this, the whole restoration of the military will come with curriculums for human rights law, with identifying what's the human rights violation, and educate the soldiers. We need to realize in Yemen, many of the soldiers, they've been violated human rights law, not because they wanted to violate it, just because they don't know what is a human right or what is the violation, or was it the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. So this is one of the sectors that also we really advocating, is more working in the security providing field, and not just like as a civil society, just keep within the civilian side.
Yes, in the back, to the wall. Here.
Thank you. I'm Getachew from Africa Program, Wilson Center. I'm wondering if you are able to tell me about the roles of external powers like US and China, Russia, in trying to strengthen or build the civil society to, you know, to influence, especially in bringing peace or bringing the conflicting parties into one. And the second one is, what is the role of regional neighboring countries in trying to negatively affect the role of the civil society in your country, Yemen, like Iran and Saudi Arabia? Thank you very much.
So, if I'm gonna start with the external power, I would say again, like, Yemen being influenced with almost all the external powers, because Yemen is very much dependent to any kind of resources. Depending on what actually these resources or these countries are more focusing or more interested in, that you would see their fund or their actions. Like, for example, counterterrorism with the US. We didn't really find like from China, I mean, a direct influence, but maybe Russia through Iran was also another direct influence in Yemen. But also Iran and Saudi Arabia, if we come to the regional, we would say this is one of the major issues, is our regional external stakeholders. I would say none of them have really civil society, or I don't know if they know what's the meaning of civil society or not. So when you're talking about a civil society within a country that not really believing in civil society, you would know that all the fund never goes to the civil society. All the process that's being going through, I would say without the international influence, you would never find a youth, women, civil society in the National Dialogue Conference. You never find them in the GCC initiatives, although it was influenced by an externals in the ground. And also this is one of the major issues that people are really concerning, especially the civil society in Yemen. So whether whose part will be winning, if this is if this will be the two influential power over Yemen, that would be a really threat for the civil society.
Back.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bilqis Saidara, and I'm here from the Department of State. And my question for you is, well, first you've spoken about youth using the internet to discuss alternatives. You've spoken about independent youth. My question for you is, would you mind, one, elaborating on specific alternatives that youth have discussed And two, I wonder if you think that the youth are causing the conflict. And three, what are your thoughts about the youth and their relationship to counterterrorism and foreign fighting and ISIL?
Okay, I mean, if I'm gonna say the youth are causing the conflict, I would rather say the youth are the fuel of the conflict. I mean, for sure, we're living in a country where 70%, almost 70% are under 30 years old. Most of them, they've been deprived from a really good education, and most of them, they are not looking for a future. So giving them alternatives, they would usually go with it, especially during the conflict, and they are the real fuel for the time we speak. They are the real fuel of all these fights happening. Giving them other option, till now, they are not getting the other option. They are not facing it. I'm not talking even right now, I'm talking even during the political stability. The civil society was very limited. When we are talking about the civil society, we're talking about, and this is why I wanted to identify local and then national. Unfortunately, there is lots of work in the civil society within the main cities, but we don't face it in villages. We don't face it in the rural areas. And in the tribal zones where youth have only one option, it still used to have also one option to go through. As for the counterterrorism, I would also take it from the two perspectives. Like we've been, and this is something that we always keep saying, we've been in Yemen suffering from the terrorism more than the U.S. All the explosions happened in our cities. Most of the actions we've been suffering from the actions of this, not just the terrorism, but also the extremism, rather than other countries in outside. But also, again, we need to realize that even these extremists, even these terrorism groups, they also given an options. They also, within these local communities, we've been hearing, for example, when Al-Qaeda used to rule in Abiyan, they used to have a kind of role of law. They used to have to fix problems and situations within the people. We heard now in Mukalla, for example, they start having a campaign against qat, which is a plant that people used to chew, and they start burning it. And many people would say that this is one of the good change, or one of the good social change of Al-Qaeda. People now, they don't have a short memories. The community, they are looking to survive. They are looking for any basic of living. So they know what Al-Qaeda capable of or what they've been doing. But for the time being, as long as there is any kind of peaceful acts they've been committing, and comparing to the other acts they've seen in Taiz or other areas, they would go with that. Another issue, which is the political vacuum. So now, when you just give them a whole city with the whole resources, who have the money, who have the power, who's controlling people, what people you need the most is more like a financial aid and support. So who's giving them the money right now, for example, if we're talking about this kind of cities? So being recruited with this, with these groups doesn't mean that I ideology agree with these groups, rather than there are people looking to survive and there is no options, rather than just to enlist themselves according to them. Another also major issues, there is another side or another stakeholders which is neither with or against, and we need to realize that these are the majority, is the people that they don't care who's ruling, who's taking whatever, as long as I'm living in peace.
Distributing, getting to Yemen.
So for the time being, I think WFP, the UN are the major stakeholders really distributing, and Islamic Relief also play a good role, also trying to send funds. And I know other different organizations didn't come in mind. And I would say like also we would really thank them because we know the struggle they used to face is like they have only one channel, which is Djibouti, that they wanted to go, and all the shipments need to be searched, and they have to wait it for all this time. And then even when they send it back, they would just realize, oh, there is a conflict in Aden, you have to send it to Hodeidah or wherever, and then send it back by land, which is also another risk. We have the ICRC in the country trying to helping people, and we knew that they had, I mean, we were sorry to hear that they have even casualties and people and death in the ground, but then they still working there and they're still helping the people. So there is an offer, but also we need to talk about the SAGE, as this is also one of the major issues that we hope that this is one of the solutions that can come up with Geneva talk.
Yes, let's wait for the mic.
Thank you very much. Dia Autay, LDF from Tunisia. You talked about the field situation. Would you like to tell us if there is an experience of or the need of physical security training for human rights activists, digital security training for human rights activists regarding the fact that there is a state of war right now, and if there is an experience of some kind of interactive platform that's centralizing the information in Yemen that can be consulted by specialists. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean any kind of help like people would need, but the reality or the reality that they cannot really find it or in the ground. Like you can't go given physical training or any kind of training. Though the civil society now, they are giving like the first aid trainings and all kinds of somehow they're trying to do no harm project, or also some of the programs that now try to work in training to help especially youth who are being accessing to the conflict zone, just how to work in a way that you wouldn't get hurt or physical threat. But I would say like this is one of the things that's happening within the community that live in the ground. So they still working no matter what kind of the training they used to face. I think this is one of the good things that also we need to spot the light, and this is one of the things that now international organizations and any kind of support need to realize that the things that been happening or the activities, the programs that been happening in before during the stability didn't really help the Yemenis, or not all of them. I would say like a big majority of them helped, but not some of them at the time we speak. Most of the kind of programs that really help them at now is like the programs that focused on building the capacity of these local NGOs or these youth activists that still working in the ground, and also the more inclusive, the more networking, the more supporting that they have long time before. But again, I would say like, I mean, in my opinion, one of the things that we need to start realizing that the idea of trainings, especially short-term, I'm not talking about long-term trainings, short-term trainings is really helpful, but maybe we need to start develop such trainings to become more like a practical training coming from the people on the ground, and focusing more in building these capacities of this youth. So whenever they've been in such actions, they knew how to act or react. Another element is the conflict. I would say like there's lots of organizations that really worked well in conflict resolution, conflict management, to help youth understand what's the meaning of doing no harm activities, or also how to identify their terminologies to work with both sides. And also that was really helping in the ground. I think this is also one of the things that we or international organizations need to start thinking of in the future.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Alt. I'm with Education for Employment. And you previously mentioned that lack of funding is an issue right now, and many organizations are seizing their funding. Could you expand on the role that the Yemeni private sector has right now in addressing the conflict in the context of youth and providing services for locals on the ground?
So, private sector is still part of the civil society, and they've been playing a very good role in Yemen. We know the business club; they were good in playing the role. I would say like the role of the, and also this is a good thing because I should mention it before, that I believe the private sector role is very essential at the time we speak, and I always believe that they need to be part of the Geneva conference. Well, one thing, because they are the really one who needs stability because they are losing their resources. The second thing is they are the only one who really have the elements for things. I mean, if we're looking at the facilities, if you're looking at the alternatives, if you're looking even at like mobilizing these humanitarian supplies, we would say the private sectors are the only one who really can help in the ground. If they've been part of the whole solution. One of the good examples also, whether people, I mean, people have different perspective, was within, for example, Shawqi Hail when he was governor of Taiz, that also he came from a business background, so he used to play, some of them would argue that he wasn't a good politician, but many would say like he was good in bringing people together, and actually he kept the peace in Taiz long after other cities being collapsed, because he just get it right in idea of establishing a community within the different parties to protect Taiz for a long period, even during the conflict. So I would say like, yeah, empowering the private sector is really important, but also encourage them more to work within the civil society, start having their share and their support within the equipment and facilities they have.
Yes, in the back, please.
Hi, I'm Eddie Zhang from the Department of State. I was wondering if you could comment on the role, if any, of the Arab League and or a joint Arab force in Yemen to help solve those problems. Thank you.
So I would say like this, the whole situation is complicated, but I would say like, unfortunately, I mean, the airstriking, from my perspective, I didn't see it as the only option. I saw that there was many different options in the ground. It came out of a solo decision that we need to start striking right now. If I start talking about the civil society, and this is also one of the idea of neglecting the civil society, we would know that there was a huge rally against Houthis in different areas. In Sana'a, there was demonstrations goes against them. It wasn't much, but it was increasing, and people start talking about the operations, about the things that they have been, about the violations that we need to take. There was some, like I would say, simple success, but also there was a pushing, like for example, when they were pushing to take them out of the university, or the idea of rule the law. The situation in general in Yemen was complicated, especially after we start facing, I mean, there was the excuse of fighting terrorism, which allowed them to take over like a major part of the city, and the collation with the military. I would say a political solution, in my perspective, was there in the ground. Maybe it would take longer, but there was a window through the dialogue happening in Mozambique, and also try to include the government in Aden, rather than start airstriking, because even it's a solution, I would say it now, it's just keeping things more complicated. The Geneva talk now will be more complicated. Even the stage of the negotiation now, it's not one level of negotiation. Even now, I would believe, even if both sides in Geneva agreed on the discussions, we know that there is the different stakeholders that they would disagree, and then you will have a second and third stage of negotiation. And also, again, not to mention the idea of the crisis still happening in Yemen. Every day, more strikes happen, more destructions. Yemen cannot cover that. even the international fund cannot really cover that. So I think it just keeps things getting more complicated.
Yes, in the back I see two hands. Can we take both questions together?
Thank you, Mohammed. My name is Naga from the Smithsonian Institution. I'm working on the illicit trade of antiquities, and there's currently a lot of material leaving Yemen. I'm wondering about the situation on the ground. Is there any awareness campaign also about this? We remember, for instance, in Egypt, when people were standing around the museum to have a line to preserve their antiquities. Is there any kind of awareness in Yemen among the youth right now about this current theft of cultural heritage? Could you perhaps expand a little bit on this? Thanks.
Thank you. Can we just wait, because you had your turn, to see, is there any other question? Okay, please go ahead, but one question only.
Thank you. So my question is different from his, and that I'd like to know, since you've spoken about youth and employment and alternatives, I wonder what role, if any, do you foresee the environment, like issues that are affecting the environment right now, and health amongst the youth? What role do those two issues
I think we lost you.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. Okay.
Environment and health, right?
Yeah, we got the question.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we go to the heritage protection and other campaigns, there is lots of campaigns having more online rather than offline in the ground. One of the things, because now, again, I would say like the situation is very catastrophic, even from the way of the IDBs. It's like it's creating lots of burden over the civil society, just keep mobilizing and moving people from one way to another. And maybe if I link both the heritage protection and the environment health, I would say also one of the major issue again is the lack of expertise within the youth. So I would if I know that this heritage protection, maybe I learned that how much of income it will bring, how much value it will happen to me right now. But for the youth on the ground, you know, they are more distracted with the real situation happening. But also, this is also another important issue that also to raise, which is especially when it comes to striking mosques and tombs, cemeteries. It is more of, I would say, like more of the things that also the other part can utilize to raise the, another or to mobilize the community against the you know, destroying our culture, destroying our things, and then that's so much covering the other two options. When it comes to environment health, to the very local level, yeah. So now all the cleaning street things happening is youth initiatives. They try to filling the swamps, so for the dengue fevers. They trying to help spreading some kind of instructions in how to avoid such fevers. Start to isolate people who get also been infected by the disease. They start to work within their limit. One of the things also I have to mention is even these removable or these remote clinics. Many of the people who sitting these remote clinics, they don't even have a medicine background. Just like they just try to find a place where they can do something, but also with the lack of expertise, their efforts will still limited.
Ahmad, let me ask you the last question. Civil society, both sides, work together, or each of them go their own separate way? There is no cooperation.
Houthis and who?
On the other side.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
the two sides who
yeah.
are fighting each other, do they, at least at the level of civil society, do they work together? Younger or no?
For me, I don't think so. Again, because the same point is, unfortunately, both sides usually very comfortable with conflict rather than with peace. Civil society usually work and give them accountability. But also we have to mention that both sides have a civil society, have their own dependent civil society in the ground. So like there is lots of organizations, human rights defender organizations, like you used to be with one side of another, which is unfortunately also, it used to bring one angle of the story, but not the other side, but also they still have some kind of civil society. But generally speaking, both sides, I don't think they are really along with the idea of civil society empowerment in the country.
Please join me in thanking Muhammad Al-Shami for a wonderful talk, and for those of you are here for the first time, and I see a lot of faces, go on our website, and we are a public institution, and we have a great number of meetings. Welcome to attend all our meetings, or some that are of interest to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.